Hello, everybody, and welcome to History and Politics with Dr. Tom. And here we are with the 7th installment of the American Civil War lecture series. The previous one focusing on the John Brown raid on Harper's Ferry and Lincoln's election to the presidency in November of 1860. He's not president yet. That won't come until March of 1861. But we need to keep on carrying on events that take place before Lincoln actually will take the oath of office, and that is going to be, of course, the Secession Crisis. Now, the Secession Crisis, contrary to the dates you see there on the screen, it does go well into the spring of 1861. But today we're going to focus exclusively on the first 7 states which seceded from the Union. First one being South Carolina in December of 1860. And you'll see on the left-hand side, that is a sketch of the Mills House in Meeting Street in Charleston. So that building, of course, is still there, and that is not, however, where the Secession Convention took place. It was where there was a large crowd gathering when news was announced, but it's not where the convention took place. We'll get into more details about that in the lecture. On the right-hand side, you will see a very popular newspaper article which is used and reused and will always be used by historians of the subject. Now, the Charleston Mercury is the name of the newspaper. That was a very pro-Southern, pro-states' rights, pro-slavery, and eventually pro-secession newspaper published in Charleston. It was the most important and most highly subscribed to newspaper in Charleston back then. Keep in mind, Charleston was a very wealthy city back then, as it is still today. But the Charleston Mercury is, of course, being so pro-secession, it's no surprise that it is the most remembered newspaper article from the fallout of the Secession Crisis. The Union is dissolved, all in big, bold letters, all capital letters as well while we're at it. And so that is it. The Secession Crisis has begun. So let's take a closer look at the Secession Crisis. Now, the South Carolina Secession Convention was not originally slated to take place in Charleston, South Carolina. In fact, it did not start in Charleston. It started in Columbia on the 17th of December of 1860, and the venue of choice was the First Baptist Church in downtown Columbia. So that is where the South Carolina Secession Convention did first meet. And you'll see here the interior of the First Baptist Church. And so you can see the pews, balconies where the members of the convention sat and debated what should go into the South Carolina Ordinance of Secession. However, midway through the session, news came about of an outbreak of smallpox. And as a result, the convention was very promptly moved to the port city of Charleston, South Carolina. And so the Institute Hall, which is located in Meeting Street in downtown Charleston, was selected for the location of the Secession Convention. And that meeting took place on the 20th of December of 1860. And so it was there that the South Carolina Ordinance of Secession was signed unanimously by the convention. And in this document, the state of South Carolina outlined the primary reasons for why they were seceding from the United States. It was more or less a Declaration of Independence. Actually, that's exactly what it was. So it was a message being sent out not just to the citizens of South Carolina, explaining and justifying their reason for seceding. It was also a message to the United States. It was a message to the whole world as to why exactly South Carolina was seceding. So let's look at some of these reasons they give. Quote, 14 of the states have deliberately refused for years past to fulfill their constitutional obligations. Okay, now what they are doing are identifying 14 northern states who, according to South Carolina, was not following the Constitution. And that is in regards to they're not upholding the fugitive slave laws. So let's carry on. An increasing hostility on the part of the non-slaveholding states, the institution of slavery has led to a disregard of their obligations, and the laws of the general government have ceased to affect the objects of the Constitution. And there you see again, they're pointing to the fact that a number of the northern states are willfully ignoring the Fugitive Slave Law, which was agreed as part of the Compromise of 1850. And that's also mentioned in the third stanza. Ohio and Iowa have refused to surrender to justice fugitives charged with murder and with inciting servile insurrection in the state of Virginia. So here we are referring to John Brown's insurrection, and that's quite interesting because they're referring to an incident which took place in the state of Virginia to justify why the state of South Carolina needs to secede from the Union. And of course, that incident does take place in Virginia. However, South Carolina is very sure that a similar event could take place in their state, and therefore they need to get out and regain control before that is able to happen. And they go further to talk about how the North became more and more disdainful towards slavery. So here we are, quote, Northerners have denounced as sinful the institution of slavery. They have permitted open establishment among them of societies whose avowed object is to disturb the peace and loin the property of the citizens of other states. They have encouraged and assisted thousands of our slaves to leave their homes, and those who remain have been incited by emissaries, books, and pictures to servile insurrection. So again, here we are. Now this is referring not just to John Brown, but also referring back to 1831 and Nat Turner's slave rebellion in Southampton County, Virginia, which we have talked about. But it goes deeper than that. It also goes to show that they're still blaming abolitionists such as William Lloyd Garrison for having kicked off these insurrections, encouraged slaves to rise up against their masters. Let's look a bit further at this ordinance. A geographical line has been drawn across the Union, and all the states north of that line have united in the election of a man to the high office of President of the United States, whose opinions and purpose are hostile to slavery. He is to be entrusted with the administration of the common government because he has declared that, quote, government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free, and that the public mind must rest in the belief that slavery is in the course of ultimate extinction. This is a powerful quote, and it shows, again, the significance of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, which we discussed in one of our previous lectures in quite a lot of detail. And so they even quote Lincoln directly from one of those debates. Government cannot endure permanently half slave, half free. And South Carolina, as we mentioned when we were talking about those 1858 debates, did take that comment as a view that slavery needed to be abolished and that it would be abolished eventually in the United States. So South Carolina clearly sees the election of Lincoln as the main reasons to why they need to secede, because of his hostility towards the institution of slavery. And they go deeper into Lincoln's elections, referring to the election date itself. On the 4th day of March next, this party will take possession of the government. It has announced that the South shall be excluded from the common territory, that judicial tribunals shall be made sectional, and that a war must be waged against slavery until it shall cease throughout the United States. So again, the attitude that once Lincoln becomes president, it's a matter of time before slavery becomes illegal everywhere in the United States, not just in new territories, but where it exists. We, therefore, the people of South Carolina, by our delegates in convention assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, have solemnly declared that the union heretofore existing between this state and other states of North America is dissolved, and that the state of South Carolina has resumed her position among the nations of the world as a separate and independent state, with full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. Now that is some very interesting wording. So I mean, look at that. So basically declaring that they are an independent nation, but not that this is something new. It states here the state of South Carolina has resumed her position among the nations of the world. And what they're doing here is stating that although they declared independence from Britain in 1776, they did not immediately agree to join the United States. And therefore, South Carolina had been an independent state, an independent country. So that is something that they are very keen to highlight, that they were for a short period not a part of the United States in their minds. So now, South Carolina, an independent country. Now, Northerners who are very critical of South Carolina's decision to secede made it very clear that they were in the view that South Carolina was too small to be a country, but also too large to be a lunatic asylum. Nonetheless, secession took place. They are declared now an independent country. The building here is the Exchange Building, which is on East Bay Street in downtown Charleston. Now, it was at the time the customs house of the Port of Charleston, so obviously dealing with trade. And what is very significant about this building is its role in the Secession Crisis. And obviously, it is not where the Secession Convention takes place. However, at the time that the Secession Convention was taking place, it had this flag flying over it. Notice 33 stars in this version of the American flag. And this flag was lowered the following day on the 21st of December and replaced with this flag. Notice the crescent moon, a symbol of South Carolina since the War of 1812, and a single star of an independent nation. And it's got a swallowtail end to it because it's a very unique flag. And that flag was then risen over the customs house. And that is very significant to understand that now South Carolina also is flying its own banner. Now that flag will not stay up there for terribly long. It is now today referred to as the South Carolina flag of secession, because a new flag is going to be designed, and it'll become the first ever state flag in American history, also with the crescent moon, but with a palmetto tree. So here we are. The South Carolina palmetto flag is raised over Charleston, raised over the State House in Columbia, and raised all over the state. That state flag, as I said, is the first ever state flag in American history, and that is another long-term effect of the American Civil War, is that state flags were brought about. That's because a state seceded from the Union. It could not fly the Stars and Stripes anymore. It needed to have its own banner, hence the beginning of the state flag. South Carolina needed a flag. They designed one. They put one up. Now, other states will follow suit very shortly. And the next one is actually Mississippi. So Mississippi will be the second state to secede. They'll have their convention for secession on the 9th of January of 1861. So notice that South Carolina went before Christmas. They had their Christmas as an independent nation, or so they thought, as well as their New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Mississippi will wait until January to launch their secession convention. Now, this is the room inside the Mississippi State Capitol building. Now, this is the old Mississippi State Capitol building. It has since been replaced by a newer, bigger, grander building, but the original one is still there, can still be visited. This is the room, the House of Representatives, where the secession convention took place in January of 1861. Now, let's look at the results, which are a little bit different from South Carolina's. They are going to vote 84 to 15. So not unanimous, like Charleston. So 15 delegates of the Mississippi State Secession Convention did not agree to it. Now, we need to talk about flags again, because obviously they're going to take down the American flag, the Stars and Stripes, from their state capitol building. But they are not going to put up their own flag at first. They will put up this flag, which they are borrowing from the flag of West Florida. It's called the Bonnie Blue flag. This flag had been the symbol of West Florida independence from Spain, a war which they won, and included part of Mississippi, part of Alabama, West Florida, obviously, and also some parts of present-day Louisiana. Now, that flag is very handy because it's a blue background and it has a single star. Therefore, that will be the flag that will go up to show an independent nation, one star, one state, independent nation. But very shortly after, Mississippi will design their first state flag, and you can see it right there. And you can see that they decide to put the Bonnie Blue flag very prominently displayed in the union of that banner. Now look to the right on the white field, and you'll see a magnolia tree. And that to this day remains the state tree of the state of Mississippi. So there you go. The second state flag comes about. So looking at the Mississippi State Ordinance for Secession, you'll see a lot of similarities with what South Carolina said. Opposition is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. Its labor supplies a product which constitutes by far the largest and most important portions of commerce of the earth. These products are peculiar to the climate verging on the tropical regions. By an imperious law of nature, none but the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. These products have become necessities of the world, and a blow at slavery is a blow at commerce and civilization. That blow has been long aimed at the institution. It was at the point of reaching its consummation. There was no choice left us but submission to the mandates of abolition or a dissolution of the Union, whose principles have been subverted to work out our ruin. So you can see here, actually, they're reaching out to countries like Britain, like France, who required southern cotton, especially Lancashire in northwest England. So they're saying that if slavery is under threat, that this trade of cotton is under threat. Therefore, your industries are under threat. Now they move on to address the Missouri Compromise and the next stanza, stating that the fact that it established the Missouri Compromise line, which slavery could not be expanded above it, only below it, but there's hardly any land below it, but there's tons of land above it. So they also go into Texas being shrunk from what Texas declared was their proper size, and also the fact that the South was not able to capitalize on land acquired from Mexico and expand slavery in those new regions as they wished to do. And it says here, quote, "It refuses the admission of new slaves into the Union and seeks to extinguish it by confining it within its present limits, denying the power of expansion. It tramples the original equality of the South underfoot." Here we are. Yes, we can't admit new slave states, therefore slavery can't be expanded, therefore we can't have new pro-slavery senators in the Senate, and therefore now, since 1850, since California entered the Union as a free state, there are two more pro-free anti-slavery senators than there are pro-slavery senators. It has nullified the fugitive slave law in almost every free state of the Union, has utterly broken the compact which our fathers pledged their faith to maintain. It advocates Negro equality socially and politically, and promotes insurrection and incendiarism in our midst. Now, this is partly true because, yes, there were a number of states in the North who were not upholding the fugitive slave law, as we mentioned, because they don't approach the fugitive slave law from a legal standpoint, as the South does. They approach it from a moral standpoint. Therefore, they don't wish to obey it. But this idea of racial equality in the North, socially or politically, is absolute scaremongering. Northerners, even most abolitionists, did not envision black voting, blacks having equal rights in society to whites. So this is something that is definitely propaganda cooked up by the South, and in this case, Mississippi. Now, promoting insurrection, well, that actually is rooted in the fact that John Brown was a Northerner who went down to Virginia, Harper's Ferry, to start a slave rebellion. Utter subjugation awaits us in the Union. If we should consent longer to remain in it, it is not a matter of choice, but of necessity. We must either submit to degradation and to the loss of property with 4 billions of money, or we must secede from the Union, framed by our fathers, to secure this as well as every other species of property. For far less cause than this, our fathers separated from the crown of England. So here they are, they're stating that the American Union is threatening the South by confiscation of their property. That property they're talking about is slaves. And so they're pointing out that this is a more serious situation than it was in 1776, when what became the United States declared their independence from Great Britain. Our decision is made. We follow their footsteps. We embrace the alternative of separation. And for the reasons here stated, we resolve to maintain our rights with the full consciousness of the justice of our courts and the undoubting belief of our ability to maintain it. So you can see, again, like South Carolina, because of the threat the North poses slavery, in their minds, they must seek independence. They must secede in order to preserve their economy and their way of life. All right, the third state to secede was Florida. And you can see here in the image on the right-hand side, you've got the old Florida Capitol building, which today obviously is still there, and stands directly in front of the new one, which is much more of a skyscraper style building, but the old one's definitely a lot nicer looking. So Tallahassee is the capital of Florida then, as it is today, and you'll see the palmetto tree in front of it. So it is a deep South state. They will secede on the 10th of January, 1861. It happened in this room here, the old state House of Representatives chamber. Although the TV screen, you can see there was not there at the time. Now, they voted for 62 against 7. So definitely a big margin in favor of secession. When they seceded, you'll see that they got the old American stars and stripes and replaced the Union in the top left with the Bonnie blue flag, again, which now is very much a symbol of Southern secession. And this one is very short. In fact, unlike what I've done with the other states, I've just had to copy and paste every word of it because there's nothing there. What's very clear is there is actually no reference to slavery in Florida's Ordinance of Secession. And they wrote very little at all. They must have been low on ink in Tallahassee that day. But they spent most of it just on the signatures itself, not on the one single paragraph, just basically announcing, we're gone. We have left the Union, and we are now an independent state. So that is it for Florida. Now, the next day, Alabama seceded. And so the 11th of January, 1861, Alabama becomes the 4th state to secede. And there you can see the state capitol building in Montgomery, Alabama, which is where the secession convention took place there. And again, it took place in this room here within the Capitol building. And that room is left pretty much as it was in 1861. And you'll notice above the House Speaker's chair there is a portrait of George Washington, which was there in January of 1861 when this vote happened. Now, the vote result. Now, the vote in Alabama was a lot closer than you might think. And it was almost a 60-40 vote here. So Alabama did not vote overwhelmingly for secession, unlike the other Deep South states. So that is very important to point out here. Now, for those of you who have read the book To Kill a Mockingbird, there is a particular part of that book which is actually not shown in the film starring Gregory Peck, where Scout Finch has a new teacher coming into her classroom, and the students all knew that she had come from North Alabama, from an area where there had been a movement against secession, and therefore all the kids in the classroom started, squinting their eyes and growling at her when she came in because they saw her as a bit of a traitor, not standing with the rest of Alabamians. But nonetheless, Alabama does secede, and they are also going to create their new state flag there, independent now and forever. They definitely weren't 100% accurate on that one, the forever bit, but you'll see that they also incorporated the Bonnie blue flag. First of all, the blue background on both sides of the flag, and on the front side of the flag shows the flag itself with the word Alabama above the star. And then, of course, you have the reverse side, which has the bush with the cotton bolls, and there's a snake there, which is protecting the state from potential future invasion by northern aggressors. Now, in their ordinance of secession, Alabama is not nearly as long as South Carolina's. It's a lot longer than Florida's, but it's not quite as long as Mississippi's either. Now, let's see what it says here. Whereas the election of Abraham Lincoln and Hannibal Hamlin to the offices of President and Vice President of the United States of America by a sectional party avowedly hostile to the domestic institutions and to the peace and security of the people of the state of Alabama. All right, now, what do they mean by hostile to domestic institutions? Well, what we're referring to here is obviously the institution of slavery. And let's take a look at what else the secession ordinance here says. So the people of the states of Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Missouri be and are hereby invited to meet the people of the state of Alabama by their delegates in convention on the 4th day of February, A.D. 1861, at the city of Montgomery in the state of Alabama, for the purpose of consulting with each other as to the most effectual mode of securing concerted and harmonious action in whatever measures may be deemed most desirable for our common peace and security. So that is very interesting. So you can see Alabama is actually making a proposal in their ordinance, which we don't see in the other secession ordinances. They're proposing that these seceding states are, first of all, joined by other southern states who have not yet seceded. And they are pushing other southern states to join them in secession. But they're also encouraging these southern states, these slave states, to join together to create a union of some sort, or a confederacy perhaps of some sort, a nation perhaps of some sort, and to work together, because I think Alabama knows that, well, the Yankees are going to be coming down to try to force these states right back into the Union. I think Alabama knows that. But with Alabama taking the lead on this, that they also are taking the lead on creating this new nation, the Confederate States of America, if you do want to call it a nation. And that is going to set the stage for Montgomery becoming the first capital of the Confederate States of America when we get to that stage. All right, so the secession of Georgia is going to come on the 19th of January of 1861. And so the Georgia Secession Convention will take place at the old Capitol building in Milledgeville, which back then, that was the Georgia state capital. It was not Atlanta, as is the case today. And this is where the convention will take place, in this room, which obviously got a bit of a new floor, it looks like. But otherwise, it is left as it was when it was first created. All right, now, Georgia votes overwhelmingly to secede, but not unanimously by any means either. So 208 to 89. And when they did secede, they raised the Georgia flag of secession, that white flag there with a red star in the middle. That's the Georgia secession flag, but it did not stay up for long. It was very quickly followed by the first Georgia state flag, a red state flag with the portico in the middle. Constitution, justice, wisdom, moderation, and of course includes also the sentinel between the right two columns. The Georgia, when it was first created as a colony by Great Britain, also named after King George, but it was established to create a buffer zone between the Carolina colonies and Spanish Florida. So it was, in a lot of ways, a citadel, a fortress. And that is why the sentinel was put there in the state seal, and it will be put there on the state's first state flag. Right, now let's take a look at the Georgia Ordinance of Secession. Now, like South Carolina, Georgia decided to make their secession ordinance look a lot like St. Paul's epistle. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, because if I do, we'll be here all week. So I just took some bits of it. So for the last 10 years, we have had numerous and serious causes of complaint against our non-slave holding Confederate states with reference to the subject of African slavery. They have endeavored to weaken our security, to disturb our domestic peace and tranquility, and persistently refuse to comply with their express constitutional obligations to us in reference to that property, and by the use of their power, and the federal government have striven to deprive us of an equal enjoyment of the common territories of the Republic. Interesting. Now, notice the word Confederate states. That Confederate word there is a lowercase c. Therefore, we're not talking about the future Confederate States of America. We're using the word Confederate old-fashioned way, which means just a loose league of states. But you can see here, they're very critical of the northern states, being so critical of slavery. And they go on to criticize Lincoln's here. The party of Lincoln, called the Republican Party, under its present name and organization, is of recent origin. It is admitted to be an anti-slavery party. A united North was now strong enough to control the government in all of its departments. So here we are talking about the fact that the 1860 election saw every state, except for a small portion of New Jersey, vote for Lincoln and the Republican Party. Therefore, George is right in saying that the North is united in that regard. All the states went for Lincoln in some way or another. And therefore, if they're united, they must be united against the South, who is very hostile towards the Republican Party. Okay. We had shed our blood and paid our money for Mexican land acquisition. We demanded a division of it on the line of the Missouri restriction or an equal participation in the whole of it. These propositions were refused. So here they are talking about the Mexican War, which of course the South was very much in favor of, the North was against. The South wanted the Mexican War to take place so that they could acquire more land from Mexico, of course, and that land would largely be south of the Missouri Compromise line, the 3630 parallel. And therefore, slavery could be extended into new states south of that line, or so they thought. And that hasn't happened, and you can see Alabama lists that as one of the reasons for secession. And they go on to say that the prohibition of slavery in the territories, hostility to it everywhere, the equality of the black and white races, disregard of all constitutional guarantees of its favor, were boldly proclaimed by its leaders and applauded by its followers. That's definitely an exaggeration of what the Republican Party was pushing for, as far as the party leadership is concerned, at least. There are very few people in the North who favored equality between blacks and whites in 1860. And keep in mind also at this point, there is no equality between free blacks and free whites in the North or the South. In the North, just in the South, blacks did not have rights to citizenship. They did not have the right to vote. So George is definitely doing a bit of scaremongering here. But they move on and talk about the Compromise of 1850 in a very negative light. So Congress then passed the Act of 1850, providing for the complete execution of this duty by federal officers. This law, which their own bad faith rendered absolutely indispensable for the protection of constitutional rights, was instantly met with ferocious revilings and all conceivable modes of hostility. For 20 years past, the abolitionists and their allies in the northern states have been engaged in constant efforts to subvert our institutions and to excite insurrection and servile war among us. Now that's a reference to John Brown. And again, Alabama, Georgia, all these southern states, Virginia, they all believe that somehow Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party was behind John Brown's rebellion, or attempted slave rebellion, I should say, in Harper's Ferry, Virginia. So we now know that's not true. Alabama had no proof. Georgia had no proof. Virginia had no proof. No one had any proof back then that John Brown had anything to do with the Republican Party directly, other than he probably supported it. I'm sure he did. But he was not influenced by members of the Republican Party to lead that attempted rebellion. So again, we see that scaremongering here from the state of Georgia. We know the Republicans' treachery. We know the shallow pretenses under which they daily disregard its plainest obligations. We submit to them. It will be our fault and not theirs. So they're saying secession is absolutely required. We submit to them, it will be our fault, not theirs. And that really is some strong language. They're saying we have no choice but to act. And act is what they do, and that's why they secede. So Georgia is definitely very angry about the Republican Party and feels threatened by it. Louisiana was next. And this took place in the old state capitol building, which is still there, and it's in Baton Rouge, the capital of Louisiana. 26th of January, 1861 is when this secession will take place. And the old state capitol building, you'll see, is very Gothic revival, which was becoming popular in the Victorian era. Now let's take a look at the inside where this took place. And there we have it. That is the inside of the old House of Representatives chamber. And I'm pretty sure that the stained glass there is new. That was not there in 1861. I don't think Louisianians were that big into psychedelia back then. But Louisiana does vote for secession, and let's take a look at that vote. So it is pretty heavy in favor of secession, 113 to 17. Now, when Louisiana secedes, they take the Stars and Stripes off their Capitol building and they raise that top flag there, what's called the Pelican flag. And you'll see the blue background from the Bonnie Blue flag is present. And that is where that blue background was inspired from. And you'll notice the pelican, which to this day is the state bird of Louisiana. And that is their state flag today, with one small moderation underneath the pelicans. There is a motto there they've added. But that flag, I'll point out, the one that you see there did not remain the state flag for very long. It was replaced by the end of the year with the one on the bottom right. And you'll see that it also, with a slightly different color, red background with a yellow star, almost communist looking. That is the next Louisiana state flag, which will serve as their state flag throughout the Civil War. And so like the Florida Ordinance of Secession, Louisiana one, interestingly, does not make any reference to the institution of slavery. And it doesn't give any reason or attempted justification for why they were seceding from the Union. They just declare that they are leaving. They are seceding, that Louisiana, therefore, will assume the authority as an independent state. And that's it. It is very simple and to the point. And if you look at the actual ordinance there on the left, you'll see it's a hell of a lot more signatures than it is paragraphs. And Texas will be the next one. And notice we are now in February of 1861. So just 1 month and 3 days before Lincoln's inauguration at the U.S. Capitol building. So let's take a look here at the old Texas State Capitol building there. So that building is no longer with us. It burned down a few years later and was replaced by the current one. This one is obviously not as big, but that's where the convention will take place. The vote is pretty close to unanimous, 166 to 8. And the secession of Texas really shouldn't surprise any of us. Texas, very much a southern state, and it's already been an independent country on its own. It's been the Republic of Texas. It has been from 1836 to 1845, when Texas did finally join the United States, or as Texans like to say, the United States joined Texas. They already had a flag that was a national flag, but it had been removed from being flown. It will go back up in February of 1861 as soon as they declare secession. And you will notice that the Lone Star in the Texas state flag is actually taken from the Bonnie Blue flag, but taken earlier. Remember I said the Bonnie Blue flag dates back to 1809, 1810, when West Florida was fighting for independence from Spain. And although Texas was not part of West Florida, Texans, when they were fighting in their own war of independence from Mexico, they used the Bonnie Blue flag, and they had been inspired to do so because they saw it as a similar struggle against the Spanish as the West Floridians had experienced a couple of decades earlier. So again, Bonnie Blue flag, very prominently featured within secession as a movement, and also in Southern state flags, even those which were designed before the actual secession crisis began. So Texas ordinance of secession is a bit shorter. So look at here. The recent developments in federal affairs make it evident that the power of the federal government is sought to be made a weapon with which to strike down the interests and property of the people of Texas and her sister slave-holding states. So again, Texas does cite slavery as the reason for secession and property. That's how they viewed their slaves. There was a bit more of a fuss kicked up when Texas seceded than when the other states seceded, and internally, that is. The governor at the time was Samuel Houston, and lieutenant governor was Edward Clark. Now, keep in mind, mentioned that Texas didn't get independence from Mexico till 1836, and then they didn't become part of the United States till 1845. The vast majority of white people who were living in Texas in 1861, who were in any position of power, actually weren't from there. So Samuel Houston, actually, he comes from Rockbridge County, Virginia. Edward Clark, he's a Georgian. As far as his personal identity, he just happened to move out to Texas when opportunity arose. So neither of these guys are native-born Texans, and there's very few native-born Texans at this point who are of adult age, really. A lot of them are people who are transplanted from other parts of the South. Now, Sam Houston, a very prominent figure, he helped lead the fight for Texan independence in the 1830s. He has been and still is viewed as the founding father of Texas. And so the governor at the time of secession, he was very much against Texas's secession from the Union, even though he was pro-slavery, even though he was pro-states' rights, even though he thought Texas was not wrong to want to secede. He was concerned that that would not end well. And so he put up a protest. He read a speech aloud, warning them not to secede. As a result, he was removed as governor and was replaced by Edward Clark. So let's take a look at Samuel Houston's speech here. Let me tell you what is coming. After the sacrifice of countless millions of treasure and hundreds of thousands of lives, you may win Southern independence if God be not against you. But I doubt it. I tell you that while I believe with you in the doctrine of states' rights, the North is determined to preserve this union. They are not a fiery, impulsive people as you are, for they live in colder climates. But when they begin to move in a given direction, they move with a steady momentum and perseverance of a mighty avalanche. And what I fear is they will overwhelm the South. Now, that is what Samuel Houston says on the 19th of April of 1861. And so at that point, of course, Texas has seceded. The Confederate government is created. And on top of that, other states have seceded as well. But we need to point out that a couple things. One, Samuel Houston, as a Southerner, correctly identifies Southerners as being a bit more hot-headed than the average Northerner, and what's going to cause the Southern Secession Crisis. And he refers to Southerners here as impulsive, and a lot of historians have said that that is one of the causes of secession as well, this fiery, impulsive attitude that Southerners had back then. But he is also correct in predicting the war's end and how it will end. And so what we need to make sure of real quickly here is that he is not anti-South. He is not anti-Confederate. He is not pro-Union. He is simply spelling out what he is fearful is going to happen. Now, when the war breaks out, Samuel Houston's son, Samuel Houston Jr., will serve as a Confederate general. Samuel Houston Sr. Will pass away midway through the war in 1863. Up to his death, though, once the war broke out, he was very much on the side of the Confederates and was wishing that they would hold off the North long enough that the North gives up, which didn't happen. But it is important to point out that he was not anti-Confederate, and he was not pro-Union by any means. Now, with Samuel Houston's quote, this warning of what's to come, I think that would be a good place to end this lecture, and I hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you have, I hope that you'll be willing to tick the like button, the thumbs up. And if you're being extra generous if you could please go ahead and subscribe. That would be wonderful. And in the next one, we'll be looking at Lincoln's inauguration, which these southern states are anticipating, and what is going to be the result of that. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon.